You know, 2 weeks ago, could be wrong about the time, but I very carefully listened, or is it read, the subtitling of the meeting of the Chinese Communist Party. As the leaders assembled in China, not for an annual jamboree, but to determine, among other things, how their country was going to deal with the rest of the world. Then I listened to their president in an interview, and he was thinking about how China is going to deal with the rest of the world in the next 200 years. And I thought of your typical African leader, who when called upon to think says, I'm just about to die, let me accumulate as much as I can, so that when I die, my family will not go hungry. I looked at the Chinese beginning to look at their company law and beginning to re-engineer their company law now that they are ready for purposes of accommodating the world. And it reminded me of what the Tanzanian President Julius Nyerere said in 1970 when he was talking about opening the African economies, and he gave an analogy of the boxing match, and he said, if you permit me, that the West sometimes tells us that when we engage in trade, we ought to engage as equals, and he said dramatically, if there is a boxing match and you pit a heavyweight and a lightweight, and you say, I'm subjecting you to the same rules, is that a match or murder? And I'm submitting to us that it can only be murder, even if you say that the rules are uniform. So sometimes I imagine to myself, you'll correct me if this is naivete at its most absurd, that when we standardize accounting procedures, there must be merit in it. But are there certain nuances that are situationally specific? And I ask that question because somebody posed the rhetorical question. Will the computer eliminate the human being? And you dramatically told us about the autonomous cars in the United States of America and how they drive themselves. Is there a case that the African accountant, while not sacrificing the inimitable standards that are universally acceptable, are there certain things that we can do that address the unique African situation in taxes, in accounting standards? Oh, we are caught up in all these. I remember I went to a meeting not so long ago of lawyers, and everybody was standing up and saying, alternative dispute resolution. And I said, alternative to what? This is African dispute resolution. Because we must begin to define things for what they are. This is true of all professions. In medicine, when we take medicine from Pfizer, that is good. From Bayer, that is good. When a Sangoma in South Africa administers some concoction, that is alternative. What alternative to what? Is it not just medicine? When the Chinese give us Chinese medicine, do you ever hear them say alternative medicine? When the Indians give us Ayurveda, do you ever hear it being said that is alternative? Why is it that when Africans are doing things in a manner that addresses the unique circumstances of Africa, then they are alternative to what? I'm submitting to us that time has come that we must acquire knowledge. But that knowledge must be applied in a manner that addresses the specificities and the unique aspects of the African continent. student, I remember reading a case, and one English law lord said of English law, he said that the English law is like the English oak. It may be transported into foreign lands, but when it is transported to those foreign lands and transplanted in foreign soils, it may grow, but not with equal exuberance as it did in our land. It must be pruned and cared for, because the specificity and the uniqueness of those circumstances so demand. I'm suggesting to you, you have qualified eminently under ACCA. We must begin to ask ourselves, are there accounting standards so that when you meet your counterparts from the United Kingdom and other parts of the world, you are able to tell them that when we deal with Africa, these are things that are uniquely African. The Chinese are saying that. The Latin Americans are saying that. The Arabs are saying that. The Africans are still caught up in determining whether they are Anglophone, in determining whether they are Lusophone, in determining whether they are Francophone. That is what we are caught up in. In other words, I'm saying that education must allow us to liberate our minds. Our own Ngugi wa Thiong'o of Kenya was right. We must decolonize our minds, even as professionals. Carter G. Woodson was right in 1933. Perhaps we have been miseducated, and we must re-educate ourselves. For the Nigerians, Fela Kuti may have been right. Teacher, don't teach me nonsense. I'm submitting that I hold the view that all of us professionals, and somebody said quite correctly, I think it was Solomon from Ethiopia who said, I'm trying to look for Solomon so that there may be eye contact with him even as I speak. I have now had eye contact with you. Solomon, you said that you wondered whether you are in a midlife crisis. Yes, you are. And you are simply the personification of Africa. Africa is in midlife crisis. And those of you who suffer from midlife crisis know that they are hot flashes. And some of the things that you see are happening in Africa ought to be managed in that regard. And that is why when I listened to Nana Akufo-Addo speaking in response to a question as to whether aid could help Africa, he said, no, Africa must think beyond aid. Which begs the question, what then must professionals do in order to contribute positively in that?